Hey, welcome to The Feast Life, where we empower you, the modern homeschool mom, to create a life and homeschool you love. I'm Julie Ross, the creator of the award-winning curriculum A Gentle Feast, a homeschool veteran of over 20 years, and a certified Christian life coach. Charlotte Mason said, life should be all living, not a mere tedious passing of time. So on this show, we seek to savor the feast of life. So go get your favorite beverage and pull up a chair. You're welcome at this table. Hello, welcome back to The Feast Life, where we believe homeschooling is about so much more than just checking off boxes. We believe it's about crafting a life that nourishes both you and your children. I'm your host, Julie Ross, and today I'm joined by the amazing Ginny Yurich from 1,000 Hours Outside, one of my favorite people to talk to about real life, real learning, and real freedom. If you've ever doubted yourself as a homeschool mom, if you've ever wondered whether you're doing enough, or if you've ever looked at the mess, the chaos, the toddlers running around and thought, is this actually working? Well, this episode is for you. In Ginny's newest book, Homeschooling, You're Doing It Right Just by Doing It, it is a breath of fresh air in a world that pressures us to perform and prove ourselves. In this conversation, she shares what she's learned after years of homeschooling 5 kids, creating a global movement around outdoor play, and letting go of perfection. And we're going to be talking about the hidden value of multi-age learning, how creativity and empathy actually grow, why your kids don't need a perfect plan, they just need a present mom, and why rest, not quitting, is the secret to longevity in homeschooling. So grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and take a deep breath. You're doing better than you think, and this conversation will remind you why. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to the Feast Life podcast. I'm your host, Julie Ross, and I'm here today with the amazing Ginny Yurich, who you might also know from 1,000 Hours Outside. Hey girl.
I love being with you. I love it. I love it. When this opportunity came up to spend an hour with you, I was like, yes, I'm in 1000%. And we had so much fun when we went whitewater rafting
I
and
know,
spent
it was
time
so fun.
together with our families. And it is just an honor to know you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Are you doing any more trips? I meant to ask you that.
No, here's the problem. It stressed me out so much
I'm
to run those
sure.
trips
Yes, a lot.
because I just felt responsible for everybody's happiness, which is
Oh,
probably just a character flaw that I have. I don't know what's wrong with me, Julie. We did 2 last year and they really did go phenomenally well, but I was like puke stressed, like for like
oh.
weeks ahead and weeks after, and I hope people had a good time. So I just probably need counseling first.
Okay, so today's podcast, we're actually going to be talking about codependency. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Total side note there. Yes, Ginny and I went on an amazing trip that her group, 1,000 Hours Outside, organized to Moab. But you do so many great things. That's actually how I found you, was with 1,000 Hours Outside. I don't even know if you were calling it that back then, but you had a blog post about hiking in Asheville, and we were going on a trip. And I just Googled it and I saw all your resources and recommendations. And so that's when I reached out to you, what, 5 years ago, and said, can you come on the podcast and talk about this concept? And then our worlds collided at these different homeschool conventions and stuff. And your podcast is just blown up, girl. Amazing, amazing. So I'm going to link that in the show notes. If you're not listening to 1,000 Hours Outside, you need to be doing that. But you talk a lot about
But
this
I want to
life.
say that you were the first person that asked me to come on a podcast. You're the very first. And so yeah, it probably would have been 5 or 6 years ago. It was always called 1000 Hours Outside, but it
Oh, it
was
was.
not always embraced. It was mostly like you're weird. That was the sentiment. And so when you asked me to come on your podcast, I think I was like floored. I was like, Julie Ross, what? It was like I have hit the big time. And I really distinctly remember that.
That's so funny. See, what do you think changed? Why do you think is it embraced more? Is it just the message you just kept
Yeah.
saying it over and people are like, okay, yeah, we get it.
What happened is people tried it, and
Yeah.
it's really just a lifestyle change. It's a something that you attempt, and even if you don't hit 1,000 hours outside in a year, you hit 400. It really is life changing.
Mhm.
It solves a lot of modern day parenting problems, like issues with screens and issues with risk taking, and all of these different things, like kids struggling with their mental health and well being, families feeling like they don't get enough time together. All of these modern day parenting problems that we have are solved with one simple change. It's not easy to do, but it is
Right.
simple to understand. And what happened is for a couple years, I was doing that. I was like, we're keeping track of our time outside. It's changing our life. It works for little kids. Our kids are getting older. It's still working. And after maybe 3 years, it might have taken 3 years, a couple other people tried three. There was three families that tried it. One in Virginia, one in Canada, and one in Georgia. These three families tried it. And I remember seeing the hashtag 1000 hours outside. Like I would put that on my stuff. It was basically just my own hashtag. And then one day I was like, someone else's photo popped up. Someone
You're
else
like,
is
who is
doing this.
this person?
And it was those three that really it started the snowball. It started with three
Mm.
families. They did it and it works. It just works. If you try it, it works. And they did it and it started from there. But it took a while.
Yeah, I love that though, because that's how all grassroots revolutions start, right? It's just word of mouth and people trying things and going getting results and I love that. And I love the movement and I love just the community that you've created. So on your podcast, you've talked a lot about this concept of 1,000 hours outside, a lot about play, a lot about just having this a different kind of approach to parenting, about the harm of screens and technology, even some like health and food and mental being. But you haven't really talked about homeschooling that much. I knew you were a
Yeah.
homeschooler because of the conventions and things. What shifted? So why a book about homeschooling? What made you go, okay,
Yeah.
now's the time to write
Someone
this?
asked me that yesterday. First of all, a lot of people get their introduction into homeschooling through 1000 hours outside because they realize that when their kids are playing outside, as toddlers and preschoolers, they are learning a lot and they are growing. And you can see that they are thriving and growing without a ton of parental input. So I've gotten a lot of messages over the years about that, about how 1000 hours outside was this sort of launching point into homeschooling. The parent just felt more comfortable. But also, we've got kids that are toward the end of high school and hitting these teen years. And I would say that choosing to homeschool is the best decision we ever made as a family. Hands down, hands down, the best decision. And I was very nervous about it at the beginning. We
Yeah.
have a lot of kids that were right in line, a lot of little ones at the same time. And so I definitely did it in a way that I wasn't expecting. I wanted to be very systematic with it, and I wasn't. It was a lot more chaotic than I hoped it would be. And then here we have these kids that are wonderful kids, and it didn't really matter. And I want to give the message that, especially if you're in those early years and you want to homeschool, but you're nervous, the message that you're going to do it right. And that there are, because of the way that homeschooling is, just by its nature, not based off of what curriculum you choose or what your schedule is or what your philosophy is, just by pulling your kids out of a system, you are doing so many things already for them. And that's what the book is about. It's called Homeschooling. You're doing it right just by doing it, which is what I believe wholeheartedly, even though there's going to be things that you do wrong along the way that you're going to change and you're going to adjust and you're going to say, I didn't like that. But as a whole, your child is going to grow and thrive. And that's the message that I want to give out.
I love the subtitle so much because I feel as homeschool parents, we can get into this. There's only one right way to do it. And this expert said, this is the way, and I have to do it this way. And then it's hard and it's frustrating and it doesn't match our values really or what we are as people or our lifestyle. And so I love that and you're so right. You created a movement that's creating a lifestyle, and homeschooling definitely fits into that lifestyle. And so it's not just here's the boxes, we're educating our kid this way, but we're actually creating a life, and that's like why it's called the feast life, right? Like
Yeah.
life should feel like a feast that we're savoring, not
Yeah.
for our kids and for us. And homeschooling allows it's a part of that whole big picture. So I'm curious. Okay, I just have to tell you this, then I'll ask the question. I did not know you were a high school math teacher until I read this. I don't know how I missed that, but I could totally see it now because your books are always so well written and full of research. And I could tell, like, by your podcast interviews too, like, you're very analytical and like deep reasoning person. So it makes sense now. I'm like, oh, okay. But when I first heard that, I was like, she taught math? Really? So,
I know. Isn't it interesting? I actually really struggle. We talked about this right before you hit record, but I have this book coming out and I'm trying to get the word out about it. I think it's an important book.
yes.
And this is the second book I've done with Baker Books. And creativity is not my strong suit. I am very analytical, black and white, give me the formula. So this
Mhm.
has really stretched me quite a bit. I feel it in my soul. I feel that stretch of
Mhm.
doing something that I'm not naturally good at.
I think it's important though, because we need people that can do the analytical part and give the, like in your book, there's lots of statistics, lots of research, lots of things that are like, no, this is why. Because for me, I'm like the creative, floaty person, and I'm like, oh, this just feels so
Like
great.
we should
And
basically work together. Like,
we
I
should.
need your help, Julie.
But then I also appreciate like having the concrete evidence. And so I think when families are making decisions, you're going to have both and, right? You're going to have the people like you're talking about that did 1,000 hours outside with their preschoolers and toddlers, and they love making the mud pies and having these reading these beautiful books with their kids, and they're like, yes, I want this lifestyle. I love the freedom that we have. And then there's others who are like, I need the facts. Am I going to mess up my kid? So I feel like your book did a really great job of doing that and combining that. So for you, what was that like pivotal moment as a high school math teacher that you were like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this anymore and I want to homeschool?
It happened pretty much right off the bat. And this is the story I've told at a lot of conferences, but I didn't have a classroom. And so I had this cart. The school was
Oh,
crowded and I was a
wow.
newer teacher and I didn't have a room to myself. I just had this, we called it a cloffice. There was three big desks in there, plus the microwave for the whole week.
I taught in the closet. My first teaching position, I was a reading interventionist and I taught in a closet too, girl.
Yeah, they just like find a spot for you. It was definitely meant to be a closet, and that's where our desks were. And we would
Wow.
go. There was three of us, and we would go. And also, there was a microwave in there, and so all of the whole staff would come in that office and microwave their food. And I was so annoyed because I would leave at the end of the day, and I would smell like popcorn, or I would smell like some shrimp pasta dish. It was like this small thing, no windows. It was
Oh,
really meant to be an
yes.
office. But I digress. I'm going to complain about it. This is 15 years ago, and I was like, I don't want to smell like your burnt popcorn. I would be so mad. But I didn't have a room. And so what they would do is they gave me this cart and I had all my stuff on it. It was like a two-tiered cart with one opening that you could lock. And I would push that cart through the hallways and go to other people's planning hours. So when they had their planning period, I would be in their classroom. And let me just say that was awful
Yeah.
because part of setting up a classroom is the
Hmm.
ambiance. And
Yeah.
I had our kids sit in desks of four. They were on a team. They were arranged a certain way. So like, we had to rearrange the room every single time I went
Wow.
in. There was not any good ambiance, and all the rooms are different shapes. It was annoying. That's not what this podcast is about, though. But this is the first time I get to just publicly complain about
It's a
how annoying it
therapy
was.
session we're having today. We're covering it all.
Yes, all the things. I'm not creative and I hated having that cart. I've got a lot of issues here. Nobody liked 1,000
Do
hours
you
outside.
still have a rolling cart? I just have to ask in your
No,
homeschool.
no. Yes, yes, we do. Yes, absolutely. They're in our kitchen. We have two of them, and the kids'
Funny.
stuff, they're three-tiered, and everyone has their own tier, and I have one,
Yes.
five kids plus me.
Lots of
So there
carts.
we
Okay.
go. Yeah, I started with carts, still doing the carts. Oh gosh. But the situation was this, and this is really maybe an important piece, Julie. And I want to say this because it's important. There's a lot of parents, moms, dads, who may step away from their career. And I
Mhm.
did. I stepped away from my career. What is so wild is that I would be 2 years away from completely retiring with a full pension.
I've thought about
Pensions
that a
have
couple times
changed.
too.
Yes, 2 years. I've got a girlfriend that was went to high school with me. We went to college together, and she stuck with it. And I ran into her the other day, and I was like thinking, oh,
Mm,
she's probably 15 years in. She was like, oh no, I'm gonna retire in 2 years. I was like, oh, I made a really different decision.
mm.
However, sometimes we think that all of that work that we put in and all of those experiences we had were a waste. And truly, they are not. There are always things that you can glean from them and look back on. So in my case, I had this cart and I was in the hallways of the high school. And this would have been in the 2000s, 2008, 2006. And this is pre-smartphone. And the things that I overheard in the hallways were so unbelievably vulgar.
Yeah.
And it was because there's no adults out there and no one, I'm not super tall. I know you're not either. So maybe I'm 5'2" or
Yeah.
5'3". I was 22. So I didn't, and I got like my cheeks, like my baby cheeks never went away. let me add this to the complaints. They never went away. Someone the other day thought I was 12 years old.
What? Oh my
Yes. I was like, No,
What's
I'm
a
not.
compliment when you get to be around our age, though?
I don't know. 12 is a little low. I would take 17, but 12? I was like, wait, come on. So I have a lot of problems in my life, seriously. But at 22, I fit in. I fit in with the kids. Nobody knew I was an adult till they saw my cart. And they didn't have any filters. And I overheard
Mm,
the most vulgar things. And then occasionally a kid would catch my eye and be shocked and embarrassed. But this is pre-smartphone. Now, at the very end, when I was deciding to come home, but right before I decided to come home, we had kids, the Blackberries came out. And so the kids were all cheating on their tests. They would have their phone in their shirt. And it was just an epidemic of cheating. They're taking pictures of the
hmm
test and
Yep.
sending it to the next hour. So
Yep.
that was
hmm
just starting. And
Wow.
additionally, there was a third piece was that full day kindergarten swept through in about a year. So up until
I
that
remember
point,
that.
kindergarten,
Yep.
it was half day everywhere. And then all of a sudden, it was full day. And I was in administration for that 1 year where I was helping with math curriculum across the district. They were making it every single school, every single classroom, every single teacher. It was homogenous. It's got to be the
Yep.
same. You got to give
Yep.
the same assessment. It's got to be on the same day. It became an assembly line.
Yep.
And teachers are so creative and teachers are
Yes.
so loving, most of them. And they're vivacious and they care about their kids and they know their kids. And it was like that was being stripped away from them. So I sat
Mm,
in these meetings with these kindergarten teachers where they were trying to figure out what are we going to do with this extra half a day. Now these kids are going to be here for a full day. They're going to be here from whatever it is, 8 to 3. It's a long day. What are we going to do? And the teachers were so unanimous. They're going to need a nap. We got
yep.
to bring back the PlayStations. I was like, when did they take away the PlayStations? Like, we don't have that anymore. Like the
Yes.
dolls and the cars and the Play-Doh and the painting. That's what kindergarten was for me. And they said, we have to
hmm
bring those back. The kids need to
Yeah.
play. They're going to need recess. And what ended up happening was none of that. It all went to academics,
Yep.
all of it,
Yep.
that second part of the day. And so those were the factors
Wow.
that caused me to know beyond know before we even had our first kid that we weren't going to do that.
Wow. That I so can totally relate to that because I was a kindergarten teacher at the time. So I very distinctly remember all those conversations. And it's just, yeah, this definitely shaped my view of play and the importance of young children playing, which I know you also hold as well. Wow, that's amazing. So you were wanting to homeschool before you even had kids, or did you have kids at the time?
I'm pregnant. No, I didn't have kids
You're
yet, but I
pregnant. Okay.
knew that, first of all, how can you be the biggest influence in your child's life if they're gone from 8 to 3? Or in our case, the bus
Mhm.
didn't get home till 4:30 for the kindergarten.
For kindergarten.
And play
Wow.
wasn't a part. And also knowing that the teachers fought for it. The teachers were very unanimous and very loud about the needs of the children. They knew the needs of the children, and someone else
hmm
decides. It's always
hmm
someone higher up. You
Yep.
don't even often know who it is. You're like,
Or
who,
who's
where?
probably never been around a kid
Yes.
ever.
Yes. Have you ever tried to teach a kindergarten
Yeah.
classroom?
Yeah.
But that's who makes the decisions. And then the
Absolutely.
teachers have to follow it.
Yeah. And so in your journey for homeschooling, I know for me, it was this is what school looks like, and this is how kids learn. And so I'm just going to do this at home because this is what I was trained in college. This is how learning looks. Was it like that for you and you had to grow out of it like I did? Or what was like your first kind of foray into the homeschooling world?
Yes, I had to totally grow out of it because I wanted to be comfortable with the box checking. And so I knew where to find my training was different. So in Michigan in high school or even middle school, I think you get the degree of the thing that you're going to teach. So you
Right,
might
right.
get an English degree. So I have a bachelor's of science in math. And then you have 1 year further than that where you get your teaching
Okay.
certificate. And I think half of that is student teaching. So the educational courses that I took were not that robust. I
Yeah.
actually remember nothing from them. And more so, it was really the classroom management piece that was important. And that's important to know because I think often people just think you have some magical advantage because you have this teaching certification. And I'm like, no, it's really nothing to do with anything. I don't
Mm,
remember it. I didn't learn anything practical. And I didn't learn, Julie, that there's all these other philosophies of education. Like here you are
yeah.
promoting Charlotte Mason and talking about this big feast. Why didn't anybody teach?
Yeah. I
Hey,
didn't learn about
there's
it in
other
college. Nope.
Yeah, there's other philosophies besides this one narrow path of one way, and
Yeah.
then you get your college degree. That's it. And I was really floored, actually, that there was all these other different educational
Mm,
philosophies. So in my case, I was planning on printing out the content standards. I didn't know where to find them because I was a teacher, but they're public.
right.
And so in kindergarten, and I talk about this in the book Homeschooling. I have distinct memories of what they were. What are the content
Mm,
standards? One of them was in social studies for kindergarten, you have to be able to distinguish between yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make a checklist. Can we
It's
do
always
that?
like,
Esther Morrow. And
Yeah, right,
last year I
exactly.
went to grandma's, but it was like yesterday. Like they have no concept of time.
Yeah, so I was like, maybe we're going to work on that in kindergarten. And one of them was to be able to throw a ball with one hand with the other foot forward. That was in the phys ed. So in some of the things I didn't know, some of the things in the English and the reading, it was like these dolce sight words. I'm like, I didn't know what that was, but I
Yeah.
figured I'm going to figure it out. What happened was, Julie, and this is maybe similar to your case, and probably similar to a lot of people's stories, I just couldn't do it. We
Yeah.
had these younger kids, we had these circumstances that were out of my control. My husband had lost his job. It was just a chaotic time. And I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't really going to be able to do it in that checklist way. And I really was freaked out. I was freaked out that I was going to mess it up. And then I started to look into it's from my midwife. Her kids went to Waldorf schools for a bit of time, and there's a Waldorf, a Steiner, I don't ever know, Rudolph Steiner, Waldorf, one of those schools here in Ann Arbor,
Oh,
Michigan.
okay.
And her kids went there, and she would tell me here and there about how they didn't start reading instruction until they were 7, and that
Mm.
they would do little chores in the classroom, and everything was made of wood and flax and linen and I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And I went and visited one time because they had this open house for a Christmas party. And I was like, oh, this is really different. And they had the schedule on the wall. Monday, bake day, Tuesday. I mean, it was like that. And this is for kindergarten. And I thought this is really different than the check the box, Dolce sight words. Can you throw the ball? Can you
Mm.
dance? Can you? It was like responsive dance and the teacher dances and the kid dances. And these are the checklist
Yeah.
things. And
That's so
I
funny.
thought, oh, there's another way. There's different ways to do this. People are choosing different ways. And that really took me down the path of reading about, like Rudolf Steiner says, there are physical markers that show a child is about to be ready to read. And one of them is that they can take their arm and lift it over their head and touch their ear. It's pretty wild. And if you've got it, yes, Julie, great.
I'm ready to
You
read.
can read. But if you have a 2.5-year-old and you do that, they can't. And
Mm.
they're your 5-year-old, your 6-year-old, maybe your 7-year-old. It has to do with body proportions and your internal organs being formed. There's all of these other things. And so I did it. I waited. I waited based off of the Waldorf school philosophy, based off of what they do in Finland. I waited because I had to. And I think that's another lesson in life.
Mm.
Sometimes your deficits turn out to be the strengths.
And that's such a beautiful lesson for people to hear because it's scary because we're told that at age 5, every child will magically learn how to read and write sentences. And you see what their public school kids are doing. And you might have family that are like, oh, can you read this for me now that you're in school? And why aren't you doing anything with your children? And it's so
Yes.
countercultural. It's definitely become more so where it's people are having this conversation, but it's still very much against the norm. And then how did you keep faith to wait?
It was just the deficits. I mean,
No.
I didn't really have many other options because we had these younger kids.
Yeah.
And that's really my story. My story is birthed out of failure. People ask about 1,000 hours outside, and there's been times where people have said, I wish I would have come up with that. And I'm like, no, you don't. It just basically came out from me being an awful parent. And so I'm like, I had to go outside, and waiting was because I had these younger kids and I couldn't do the checklist thing. And so more so it was circumstances, but I did really at
Mm.
that point start to read, Julie. I started to read about different philosophies like the John Holt, like the Waldorf, like Charlotte Mason. And I started to learn about all of these wonderful other ways that kids can learn and grow. So I would say, and I'm really thrilled to have this book out there because it's books, books are what
Mhm.
gave me the backbone to stick with it because you start to read other people and you're like, if enough other people are saying this, maybe there's something there to be trusted.
That's a really good point. And your book does a great job, like I said, of bringing in all that kind of research and hopefully can give parents that kind of foundation. But this is why I love you because you're so real. Like it's not, I have figured this all out and let me impart my wisdom to you, even though you're extremely wise, right? It's okay, I went through it. This didn't work. This worked. This is what I learned. And now I'm going to share it with you, which is really what learning actually is. It's
Yeah.
not, I'm going to figure it all out. And if I follow these steps, I will have this perfect homeschool for my children. It's learning is trial and error. And oh, that didn't work. Okay. Edison said, I learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
that didn't work in my homeschool. Let me try something else. And it's being willing to be okay with that and not go, oh my gosh, that didn't work. This is the end of the world. And I'm completely messing up my child. Did you ever have freak out moments like that? What did you do when you felt I am failing? Let's just go outside.
I don't really feel like I had that many freak out moments. I felt nervous about not doing it the typical way, but then when we hit 7, the kids caught on to reading so fast that it was really wild. I got to see it for firsthand. And there were a
Mhm.
few people that were like, "What? What? There's 7 and you haven't done anything yet?" And I really
Yeah.
hadn't. I hadn't done hardly any seat work yet. We did a ton of reading. We did a ton of time outside. We did cooking and all of those types of things, but we hadn't done an actual curriculum. I bought one, but I didn't use it. So there we go. I'm sure tons of people have done that.
Oh, yeah.
But this is part of the book. This is in chapter 6. This is in chapter 5. Some people always know their book chapters. I'll interview people and they'll be like in chapter 17. I'm like, how do you know? I like, all right, I've got my book next to me for reference. I don't know which order I put them
Yeah.
in. I don't have it memorized. But part of homeschooling, this is what I've learned, and I know that we're right in alignment on this, and we've talked about it in person, is that so much of homeschooling is, and so much of learning, not even homeschooling, so much of learning and growth is modeling. And
Mm,
one of the things that you're doing right as a homeschool family, just by choosing to homeschool, is you are being around your kids and you're modeling how to craft a life. You're modeling
yes.
those little adjustments and tweaks that you make along the way. I think because we both have this experience of being a classroom teacher, we know, and just being a kid, we know that the kid has no insight into what's going on behind the scenes. They're just told what to do every day. They don't know. They don't know how you made the lesson plan, why you chose
Yeah.
to do that, that these edicts are coming down from on high from someone who, has never been with a child, it
Mhm.
appears. They don't know any of that. But when you're in your home and you're saying, ooh, that didn't work, or oh, I really want to get back to our rhythm, or this happened and it blew up our schedule. So we're going to rest for a couple days, or we're going to go to the zoo and then we're going to try again, or that curriculum,
Mm,
nobody likes that. You seem to learn best this way. All of those little things are modeling to a child. Like you said, first of all, it's okay to have something that you walk away from. It's okay to
mm,
be like, nah, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And to live your life in front of your kids is so valuable. It's something that nobody
mm.
really talks about, but what's the value there? And you and I've talked about as our kids have gotten older, that they've been able, like I put out a video this morning and trying to promote the book, something new that we're trying. Like, this is not my forte. I'm not super creative, but I'm like, make these videos. And I have one of my sons, that's what he wants to do for a career.
That's
So I'm
awesome.
able to pay. This
Hmm.
goes in his portfolio of work as something that
Hmm.
he's done. He's helped with a book launch. This is start to build that up. And they're able to do real world things and see, how do you launch a book? Maybe someday he's going to write a book
Yeah.
and he's going to have some experiences because it's been modeled for him. And that works in so many areas. If it's just how to figure out your dinner schedule, how to figure out your grocery shopping, how to figure out, do you care that the laundry's folded or you fine to keep it in the baskets? Even
Hmm.
that, even just to be like fine with letting some things go. Kids are learning
Well,
so much.
yes. And I love that. And I think maybe it was Peter Gray that you had on your podcast. I can't remember, but talked about how, like, in for thousands and thousands of years, this is how children learned. Like, they were, especially like
Yeah.
tribal kind of communities where they're watching their parents hunt and take care of the house, and like they're experiencing it and learning it alongside their parents. It's not something that they have to go off to learn.
Yeah. And they were brilliant. That's
Yeah.
another thing that when you think about these tribal different cultures, you think there's almost like this I don't know, I guess a view that they were like, "Ooh, they're just
Yeah.
hunting and they're just picking berries."
They're just
But
surviving. I can do.
they had to know so much. They had to know which mushrooms were poisonous, and there was such a slim margin of error. And
Mm-hmm.
I've read books that
Mm-hmm.
talks about if you were to talk to one of those kids and really know, they know how to start a fire, they know how to make an arrowhead, like all of the things that they knew were so phenomenally deep, and there was a breadth to it. And they learned it just by being around and multi-age experiences, and they're learning the culture of their time.
Yeah. So in your book, you talk about several things that you're doing just by homeschool. So let's touch on a few of those. One of the ones you
Yeah.
just brought up was multi-age experiences.
Hmm.
So by giving your kids, by homeschooling, and even if you're homeschooling one child, right? You could be in homeschool groups where there are multiple age children because they don't separate them by their age. This crazy
Right.
thought of like, where did that come from? Let's put all 14-year-olds around each other all day long so that they only think like 14-year-olds. That's wise. But what have you seen in your family as one of the gifts of you're doing this right because your kids get these multi-age experiences? What do you mean by that?
And I do agree with you. I agree that if you're an only child, first of all, it's multi-age because you're with your parent, but also you're out in the community. Even if you're not doing a co-op or anything like that, you're definitely rubbing shoulders with people of all different ages. And a lot of times it's grandparents or aunts and uncles, there's extended family, there's cousins. And so you're not 40 hours a week with a whole bunch of other kids that are exactly your age, which breeds bullying and contempt and competition
Yep.
just by the nature of it. Not anybody's fault.
Yep.
It's not the teacher's fault. It's just the way that life is. It's the way that things are. And have I felt it? I have occasionally been in situations where I'm like with a ton of other women that are exactly
Oh,
pretty much my age and stage. And
yep.
you're, oh, it was actually, I felt it. Remember when those really tall boots were in style?
Oh, the hunter
It was like
boots,
people would wear, yeah,
black,
yeah. And
or the
okay,
what?
okay. So, anyways, I've been out of style the whole time basically. And I remember being at a place and being like the only one without those tall boots. And I was like, oh, I missed the memo. So it does. You
Yep.
automatically are looking around and comparing, and you don't do that when you're with a more diverse group of people. So I'm going to
Right.
tell this one story. It's actually one of my favorite stories because I often think that we look at these deficits. Like we want to teach our 8-year-old and we want to do the science curriculum with them, but we have a baby or we have a toddler. And so it's
Mhm.
just chaotic. There's a man named Steve Demi who wrote the Math UC
Yeah.
curriculum, which we like. Well, I'm a math teacher. It's very systematic. We've really liked that curriculum. And I heard him speak one time and he said, the hardest thing about homeschooling, I was like, ooh, what is it? I want to know. What is the hardest? And he said, is a toddler. And I was like, yes, and
I think
amen.
there's
I
lots
mean,
of parents listening going, Amen, 100%.
yes. And then when we started homeschooling, I feel like I had four toddlers. There were
Yes,
so
me
many
too.
of
I
them.
had three under the age of 3 when I started
Yeah, so
homeschooling
like
my
they're
school age
all
kids. Yep.
toddlers.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you look at that and you think that is a negative. If only
Mm.
all of my children were 8 at the same time. If only it
Right.
looked like this systematic thing I could do like the public school system or private school system. But I read this book about empathy by this woman named Michelle Borba. And she was talking about this program called Roots of Empathy, which I think they do in
Mm.
Canada, and maybe it's spread out. But the basic premise is they basically hire out a baby and they bring these
Oh.
babies into the classroom because
Mm.
kids are not learning empathy. They
Ooh.
can't empathize, they can't put themselves in someone else's shoes. And so they're hiring out babies.
Wow.
And they would bring these babies in for the full 9 months of the school year. Every month, the baby comes in once a month. So the children are watching the baby grow and get
Oh.
older. And the whole point is that they sit in a circle and they're trying to figure out how the baby feels. Don't talk too loud. Don't
Mhm.
startle the baby, all of these things. And they're paying attention. They're learning to pay attention, obviously, because babies are very dramatic and they're going to show you their emotions. It's a
Yeah.
great idea.
Yeah.
And there was a story in this book
Mm.
about empathy by Michelle where all of a sudden the thing ended and they couldn't find the baby. It's like, where's the baby? Where'd the baby's not in the circle? Where'd the
Oh
baby
dear.
go? Oh dear, yes. Where is the baby? And they found over in the corner that there was this middle school boy that was holding the baby and
Oh.
bouncing with the baby. And he'd had a really hard life. This is the story that she tells in this book. And he'd had a hard life. Maybe his parents are in jail or these different types of things. I had students that had really hard lives,
Me too.
hard life. And he says to his teacher, if no one has ever loved you, can you still be a good father?
Oh, you're gonna
And
make me
it's
cry.
it's so deep. It was such a deep thing for that child to think and to say and to feel. And it just showed the power of a baby. The power of a baby. And I think we look at that as a society, as a mother, as a father, as someone who's even outside of the circle of homeschooling and be like, yeah, they can't really teach well. How are they going to teach if they're not going to do it right? If they've got a toddler and baby at home, what that 9-year-old is going to get the short end of the stick. And it's not true. It's not
Mm.
true because multi-age experiences, and we can easily see how the older helps the younger. That's
Right.
easy to see, right? The younger one's going to follow after the older one. They're going to try things that are harder. They're going to
Yes.
climb a little bit higher, that type of thing. And so
Yeah.
we look at it like the older kids are getting shortchanged because there's these babies and toddlers
Mm.
around. But that is not true. Those babies and toddlers are teaching the older kids so much about life and
Mm.
empathy and how to adjust for someone else and how to pay attention. So the multi-age piece, I mean, that Peter Gray talks about that. I think he's probably the country's expert, maybe the world's expert. His main book is called Free to Learn, but that multi-age experiences are one of the best ways to learn, and that he calls school a prison.
I
I
know. He
was
doesn't mince
like,
words.
I know he does not. And you know what he says? He says,
I have it right
everybody
here.
knows it. Yeah, he says, everybody knows it. I know it's on my shelf behind me. He says, school is a prison. Everybody knows it, but
Mm.
people are too polite to say it. And his whole premise is that
Mm.
we are basically stealing those multi-age experiences from kids. And it's not just for 1 year. It's not. It's for 13 years. It's their whole childhood, basically.
Yes. And then we wonder why people are so self-centered and into their own world. And it's because we had them be that way for so many years and they never got to experience it. And yeah, I love that. I know that has to be so encouraging because I know the moms that I work with feel that a lot, that if only I didn't have these toddlers or babies distracting us, then my
Yeah.
homeschool would be perfect. It's like when I ask, what's your biggest struggle in your homeschool? That is always the top one, or it's kids resisting school. One of those two are always the biggest struggles that people have. And
Yeah.
it's, yes, like you're saying, I love that concept of empathy. And it's interesting because, that study, the Project Oxygen that Google did of their top employees, STEM skills were last. The top two skills were creativity and empathy.
There you go. And what
How
what
do we
will
teach
you do?
empathy?
Yes, with
Hey,
babies.
there's no workbook page for the empathy.
Yeah. You
It's,
teach it
yeah,
with
it's by
babies.
being multi-age experiences, being around people, which you get naturally when you're homeschooling, all these different ages, but also in the stories that you're reading, right? Like you said, can you put yourself in someone else's shoes? If I'm just reading a bunch of facts in a book, no, I don't know what it was like to be part of the Little Rock Nine. But if I'm reading a book about segregation through this eyes of this teenage girl, oh, I can't really, but there's a part of me that knows, oh, that must have been so hard. And you start to develop that empathy and you're able to think outside of your own little world here, which is so important. And then that creativity piece, like we are talking about, that comes in as well. So how have you seen let's talk about creativity for a second because that's so Sir Kenneth Robinson, his TED talk is do schools kill creativity? The short answer is
Right.
yes. So I'll save you 20 minutes of the TED talk.
Yes, and quickly. It kills it pretty
Yes.
quickly.
Yes. And so I think that's what a lot of these parents probably see from doing your 1,000 hours outside is how play and being out in nature builds creativity. And they're like, I don't want this to die inside of my kid because
Yeah.
we're all born with such amazing amounts of wonder and awe and creativity. But you're
Yeah.
right. So how do schools kill it out? And then how just by homeschooling, you're giving your kids freedom to explore that.
And I think we're also born with self-reliance. That's another thing. We're born with this drive to do and complete and join in. That also gets kind of kicked out of the system because you're just told what to do. That's what kills creativity is just being told
Being
what
told
to
what to.
do. And that drudgery of just, oh, I don't want to do this. And then you run out of time. So you're told what to do. It takes up this such a large chunk. It's 15,000 hours of childhood.
Wow.
So there's that piece of it. There's also the piece that it's time. There's no time for boredom then. Creativity is born out of boredom,
Yeah, and you have a whole
which
chapter
we're
about that, which is so good.
which we're so scared of. We're so
Yes.
scared of because kids come. I think it's twofold. First of all, kids really whine and complain about it.
Yep.
And so that's annoying. And that's
Yep.
really something that you don't want to have to deal with. The other thing I think is that we're afraid that if we don't feel all the time, we're not a good parent. There is a cultural
Mm,
message. You got to enrich,
yeah.
enrich. If you've got 10 minutes, you should be enriching. And so then there's no time for the kid to come up with nothing. So in our home, the kids are drawing and they're creating Our youngest is always making something out of cardboard. And right now, underneath the school table, she has a shop set up. And there's little pieces of paper that are hanging, and you can come order from her store. And you have to climb under the table. So I'm like, I don't really want to come. Okay, whatever.
What kind of store is
Bye.
this?
Yes. But it's because there, once again, it goes back to what feels like a deficit, which is that you cannot logistically fill all that time. You're nursing your baby, you're running around after your toddler, they're knocking over blocks, you have to serve another meal, you have this appointment you have to get to. And so, inevitably, a child grows up with more space, and that allows
Mm.
them the opportunity is shifting very rapidly, and it will continue to do. It's only getting faster. Then you want to be creative, and you need to be resilient, and you need to be flexible and have grit and all of those types of things, which just go hand in hand with home education.
It allows so much more opportunity for boredom, but that's when imagination takes root, is having that free space and that creativity. So I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that we're giving our kids that gift. And I think we really need to see, and that's why your book is so great, because we are giving our kids such a gift. And it
Yeah.
takes some of the pressure off to see all the opportunity that we're providing for them that's technically not even school. If
Yeah,
that's,
exactly. Well,
yeah,
yeah, you don't measure that. No one is like, how creative are you in comparison to
yes,
last year? And how empathetic are you in comparison to last year? And do you have resilience? People tag me
yeah,
a lot with 1,000 hours outside, and they'll tag and they'll say, we made it 4 miles on our bikes. And it's a little kids, and they're on those balance bikes, which are so cool, the ones where they pedal with their feet on the ground.
yes, those are
We
so
made it
great.
4 miles. And you're like, that's a lot of stamina. That kid has a
Mm,
lot of stamina. Is that measured? I think stamina matters. I
yes,
think that a lot of these things matter. And they're not measured. And so when they're not measured, it's like we don't value them. And yet, in this day and age, and it may not have been this way. It may not have been this way 30 years when you could when you could get a career and just stick with it and plug and play. I've got this career. I'm just going to go. I'm going to retire when I'm such and such an age. I'm going to have
yep.
a pension. But we don't live in that world anymore. And we haven't for
No.
a while. So if you've got your kid on this assembly line approach toward something that doesn't exist, it was like there was an assembly line approach toward an assembly line. But now we
Yes,
have an assembly line approach toward not that, toward
yeah,
something that's very diverse and chaotic. And you have to be on your toes and you have to be able to adjust. And so it just doesn't make the sense that maybe it used to. And I don't know if it ever really did, but it maybe made more
yes.
sense when there was more of these 30-year type careers.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I had a lady on my podcast recently. It hasn't, yours will air before hers, even though I recorded it, but she's been a career expert for 25 years. And she was saying that now statistically, someone will switch careers 6 times, not just jobs,
Yep.
careers, like completely different things. And so, are you giving your kids, like you're talking about, that resilience, that creativity, that drive, so they are able
And the
to kind of switch?
social skills.
Yeah,
Okay,
oh,
we
yeah.
talk about that too. If they're going to change 6 careers in the course of a lifetime, that means you're going to have a lot of coworkers and a lot of bosses and
Yes.
a lot of clients. And can you interact with them? That's a whole
Mm,
other piece of home education, is that there is a lot more time for those interactions. You don't have as much work, and especially in this day and age, because kids are not getting all of that recess time. That's where they would have learned it in the past, and they used to get
mm,
it, but they
mhm.
don't anymore. In the district I grew up in, it's one 20-minute recess in the afternoon, one plus lunch, which is 45 minutes, which includes lunch,
Yeah.
going to the cafeteria, washing your hands, maybe using the restroom, short, Julie. And here we have like the competency of the future. This is what I've been told. The competency of the future is relational. Our kids getting a chance to work on their
But I
relationships and
can't
their
believe you're
social
saying
skills.
this, Ginny, because we all know that homeschoolers can't socialize. If we want them to socialize, we have to put them 8 hours a day with people their own age where they're told not to talk. That's
Right,
always
right.
cracks
And
me up. That's not
well, and
socializing.
I think it's I think actually I'm really glad you brought it up, because there were this is important for people to understand. In the 1980s, the homeschooling was illegal in a lot of places.
Oh yeah, it
And
wasn't until like
also
1993 or something. Yeah.
yes, hardly anyone was homeschooling. And so what happened is parents had these convictions. They didn't want to send their kids to these different institutional settings. So they kept their kids home basically illegal. They broke the law. And what they would do is they would pull, I've talked to people like this. They would all pile in the van and they would back out the driveway, head to the school. Then the kids would duck. They
Oh
would
wow.
duck down and they would drive back home and come into the garage and get out.
Wow.
And they would stay in the house all day because they were doing something that was considered illegal. They weren't out in the community.
Oh,
They
I
didn't go
can't
to the
even
grocery
imagine.
store. Yes, I can't imagine either. They didn't have any other friends that homeschooled, but they did that. So the stigma
Wow.
comes from that. That's what it
Yes.
comes from. And rightfully so.
Correct.
I commend those parents. I
Yes.
commend the ones who came before us bravely and stuck to their convictions and did it when it was way harder than
Oh
it
yeah.
is now with no internet and no co-ops and no support, no conferences, no podcasts.
Yes.
They did it then. And of course, those kids would have been slightly odd because they were home all day and they
Yeah.
couldn't go out until everybody got home from school. So, yes, that's understandable.
Mm.
But that is not how homeschooling is today and hasn't been for a while.
That's a great point. I never put the two together, but that makes so sense of where that stigma comes from. But like you're saying, they actually do get those relationships, not just with their family and like the multi-age experiences, but by being out in the community, by actually having life
Yeah.
help socialize you. And really what like they're saying, like about with the six different career things is that like your network, being able to network, know multiple people in multiple different professions is what's going to help you be successful because you're
Yeah.
going to change. Do you know someone who also does this? And you're out in the world and you're meeting people. Oh, I might be interested in this job that you never even thought of because you quote the statistic in your book. I talk about it too, is that most of the jobs that will be around by the time our kids graduate don't even exist today. So what are we actually preparing them for? I
Yes,
don't
we don't
know.
know.
We don't know.
Yeah, but it sure seems like we know, doesn't it? It's so systematic and takes up so much of their time. And what really matters, I think, is that they have some time of their own. That matters. And that leads to a lot of life skills that can help in this rapidly changing world.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so let's wrap up here. A parent is listening and they're considering homeschooling or they've started homeschooling, but they're burnt out and they're tired. What would you say to them?
Take a day off. That's what I would say.
Go
Here's what
outside.
I would say. Yeah, I would say, first of all, don't quit. And one of the things that really was eye-opening to me is John Taylor Gatto. He has some phenomenal books. They have just such striking names. One of the names is called what's the hidden curriculum of compulsory education?
Oh, yes.
It's called
Dumbing
Dumbing
us
Us
down.
Down. Dumbing Us Down. He has a book called Weapons of Mass Instruction. Like, okay, people who came
How do you
before us were
really
like,
feel about this?
yeah, they like, you can tell that these people live before cancel culture. Because they're like, I'm just going to say it. School is prison. We all know it. I'm just going to say the things. But John Taylor Gatto said, and he said it is very well researched that when a child is at the right age and stage, and obviously kids have different things. Maybe they're dyslexic. Every kid is different. They're individuals.
100%.
But for a lot of kids, when they're at the right age and stage, it will take 50 to 100 contact hours to teach them functional literacy, which means they would be at a place where they could learn anything and everything that they ever would want to know moving forward. And kids have different interests. They want to learn about something that you're not interested in. One of our kids really likes those. They're like these historical books of disasters. I can't remember what they're called, but about the
Survived?
yes, yes. She is never without an I survived book. And she'll be like, in the Black Death. And we'll be like, yeah, I don't know about the Black Death. Honest. I don't know too much about the Titanic. I wasn't allowed to watch that movie. I
Yeah.
don't know. And I'm sure I should have read about it more, but there's so
There's
much that
so
you can
much.
learn about. And your kid, they find something that's interested in them. And if they're functionally literate, then they are going to increase their literacy because they're going to find something that sparks
Mhm.
their interest and they're going to learn more and more. So 50 to 100 hours. It means that you don't have to be at a desk for 6 hours a day doing school with your kid. The resisting school piece, which is really interesting that you brought that up earlier, Julie, like we haven't really had that because it doesn't really take that long. I'm trying to take up not much of their time and give them
Hmm.
a lot of time that is their own. So you can be reading and it can be really enjoyable. And if you have an hour or two of seat work, then you can just keep saying you'd have to do 4 times this much.
Yeah,
And they
right.
start to understand that, right? That this is really only a little part of your day, and you're going to have a lot more of the part of your day to figure out on your own. So, do you have 50 to 100 hours over the course of a childhood?
Yeah.
Yes. So, it's okay. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to slow down. It's okay to go to the
Mm,
zoo. It's okay to go play outside. It's okay to spend a whole day baking. My advice is rest, don't quit. And that really is my advice for
mm,
everything. It's my advice for entrepreneurship. It's my advice for when you're trying to learn something new. It's hard. There are hard parts of life. So take a
100%.
break from it for a little bit. Take a break from what you've been doing, rest, and don't quit. And if you are afraid to take the leap, I tell people you'll never regret it. And I'm sure that you say the same thing. You will never
Mm,
regret this time that you have with your kids, and they thrive, and you don't know the outcome. You don't know where it's going to land.
no.
And so that's the faith that you have to have that, as Peter Gray said, kids are biologically designed to self-educate. They come into the world, I would say God made them that way. They
Yeah.
come in the world just ready. They're ready to go for it. And so our main task really is not to hold them back. And so that's why the book, Homeschooling, You're Doing It Just by Doing It, is about the innate things that you are already doing. And I think we have to think about these things. Why don't we
100%.
talk
We
about it?
don't. We don't
Why
talk
don't we
about them
talk about
enough.
it on the other end? Why aren't we like, hey, isn't it weird that all those second graders are together every
Yeah.
single day why aren't we talking about that? Why isn't it weird that they only get a 20-minute recess? Like, why aren't we so focused on that?
Mm,
We're focused on all these other things. We're focused on all the deficits of homeschooling, those weird unsocialized homeschoolers, but we're not really thinking critically about the portions of systemized learning in institutional settings that might not behoove a child. And so the message is that's the message. If you're scared, you're going to do it right. That means you're going
mm,
to do some things wrong. But
right.
overall, for the whole thing, if you're a parent that loves your kids and you're committed to grow, you're going to do it right and your kids are going to turn out just fine.
Yeah, it's interesting. Horace Mann, who was like the founder of compulsory education in the United States, Massachusetts in the middle 1800s, one of his reasons why children should be separated from their parents is because parents could never educate their children because they love them too much, that they would dote
Wow.
on them too much, that they would let things go. And you need to have someone who could be hard on children to get them to learn properly and be successful adults. And it's so fascinating to me because you love your children so much. You're the perfect person to homeschool them. You've spent your whole life, their whole life, knowing they like this, they don't like that. This is how they grow. This is how they change. They learn how
Yes,
to walk
you
and
love them.
talk and do all
And
these other important
yes,
skills with you.
yes, you love them and you know them. And that's another thing. As a teacher, and you would relate, you have these new kids that come in every year. Now, as a high school teacher, you have 150 every
Oh, I can
semester,
imagine that.
150 students, and you don't know them and you don't remember them either.
Mhm.
You
Yeah, I had a
remember a
girl come up to
few.
me at the restaurant the other day. She's like, Mrs. Ross, is that you? And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, who are you? Who are you? She's like, you taught
Yeah,
me back in fifth grade. And I don't know, like, of course, she doesn't look anything like she did when she was 10. So I feel like a little better. I'm like, oh my gosh, she
yeah.
looks so different. But I was like, gosh, I don't. I remembered her
Hmm.
when she started talking, but it's, yeah, like you can't possibly know everything about all these 150 children. So
Yeah.
just by being their parent, so maybe we could all just breathe
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
release some
You're
pressure.
doing it right.
You're
You're
doing it
doing it
right
right just
just
by
by doing.
making the choice to doing it, to do it. I don't know. I
It's
botched
so
that, even though it's the subtitle of the book.
okay. So tell us the name of the book with the subtitle and where they can find it.
Okay, listen, buy it on Amazon because that's the best place to buy
And
it.
are you
Or
doing
a bookstore, but sometimes they're
pre-order
not bookstores.
things too?
Yeah, there's pre-order things. You get the free audiobook, which is a cool thing. It's basically like 2 books for one. So the book is called Homeschooling. You're doing it right just by doing it. You can get it probably anywhere books are sold. That's what people
Okay.
say. I'm just going to repeat what everybody else says. I hope it's in bookstores, but sometimes your book doesn't end up in bookstores. It's like a surprising thing that I learned with my
Oh.
last book. You're like, oh, it'll be at Barnes and Noble, but then you're like, oh, I guess not. It's not
Oh.
there. So
Where is
obviously, you can get it on Amazon and you get the low price guarantee. So that's a good place to go to get
yes.
it, but I'm sure you can get it wherever books are sold online for sure. Homeschooling, you're doing it right just by doing it.
And we'll put that in the show notes and a link to your podcast because if they're not listening, they definitely need to subscribe and listen to that because again, it's reinforcing this message constantly with all the different people you bring on and the lifestyle that you can create when you are homeschooling and you are spending this time outside. So thank you so much for writing. I really do feel like this book is going to be so impactful. You did a fantastic job.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you for having me on. I love what you do. I'm all about the feast life. And I love one of my favorite things you said at the very beginning was about how it made your life better too. You said life should feel like a feast. You said it right at the beginning. Life should feel like a feast, and for us too. And how many people's lives do not feel like a feast, kids and adults? So
They
this
feel
is
like
a
they're
decision.
starving, right? Yeah.
Yes. This is a decision for everyone. So
But you're
thank
doing
you.
it right just by doing it.
Yes.
Yes, I love it.
Thank you for having me on. I so appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Let's wrap up with some key takeaways. So number one, like the title of Ginny's book, you're doing it right just by choosing this homeschooling path. I know homeschooling may feel overwhelming, but the act of stepping outside the system already is going to meet so many of your child's needs and set them up for success. You don't have to do it perfectly. Number two, multi-age learning builds empathy and life skills. Having babies, toddlers, and teens under one roof isn't a hindrance or a drawback. In fact, it's one of homeschooling's greatest strengths. Kids learn to adapt, care, lead, and empathize in ways traditional classrooms just can't replicate. Number three, boredom is the birthplace of creativity. When kids have free time, they invent, create, and discover. You are not responsible for filling every moment of your child's day. Remember, space is a powerful teacher. Number four, the system is outdated. You don't have to create it at home. In this episode, Ginny shared her own breaking point as a high school math teacher and the red flags that convinced her that the system wasn't designed with her kids' best interest in mind. And last but not least, rest, don't quit. Burnout is real, but instead of giving up, take a break. Trust the process. Trust is all going to be okay if you take some time to bake some cookies, go to the zoo, or play outside. The beauty of homeschooling is that it incorporates our actual life. And remember, homeschooling, you're doing it right just by doing it. Make sure to check out the show notes for a link to Ginny's new book, and thanks so much for listening. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this episode, please heart it down below and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Leave a comment and let me know what you learned in today's episode. I'd love to hear from you.